Hello everyone. This is Charles Wynn with Miles behind me. Today I'll be discussing anyone that ever did rideshare where you feeling like you're by yourself while you're riding. It's not a bad thing. Individual gets in your car and they tell you that you can play whatever you want to play, and then they'll put their headphones on. They won't say anything at all, and it could be usually a short commute. Short to me is about 15 minutes. You really don't feel the difference. However, once you get into 45 minutes to about an hour, it can be very good. For example, one time I was doing a ride where I picked up some folks from DFW Airport, and I had to take them to Plano. They were actually a married couple. They were, I don't know, they must have been tired because they put their headphones on and they went to sleep. And they had like the headphones on where they would not be able to hear anything that you're saying. Um, and I did what I normally do. I just played my music, um, played a podcast that was talking about something constructive, but I was able to play it, pretty loud, loud enough to where you think they would have woke up. However, they didn't. I kept driving, and I almost, turned to some music that would have been deemed unprofessional. Um, though at one time in the past, I would have done that because I was selfish. In addition, when I first started, um, I was just not really taking it seriously. But by this time, I had gotten to the point where I was, taking rideshare seriously, and I was keeping it professional. And I remember on that day, I was driving. I was like 20 minutes in, and I looked back just quickly to make sure they were good. Looked in the mirror as I'm driving, and they were fine. They were just out, knocked out. I'm like, you know, it felt alone, but it still felt good. And I was like, they did tell me that they had a little layover. They had an issue with the plane. And, I know that can be taxing. We all know that have traveled before that when you go through the airport dealing with TSA, and then depending on who you take, it's different depending on if it's Delta Airlines or it's Spirit. But as long as you get there safe. But back to the ride, it got to a point where I was listening to a few sports talk shows, a few political shows, and before I knew it, I got to the destination. I had to wake them up, and they were surprised I got there so fast. They said it felt like it was a 10-minute drive. However, it felt longer than what it was. But I was grateful they gave me a good tip. And I'm driving. It's almost my uh, third ride of the day. I get back on my side of town, and I get another individual. And another individual jumps in my car, and they were full of energy. Um, but they said they had a long night ahead. They had to babysit for family members of theirs because this was a Friday, and they had some family that wanted to go out and get busy in a provocative way, and she agreed to watch the little youngins. So she said, she was taking a nap, and this ride was about 25 minutes. And time she went to sleep, I just cut my music on. I was listening to some music from the 90s. I believe it was AZ Sugar Hill I was listening to. And, it felt good. I was like, man, peaceful, quiet. The roads wasn't really busy. So it allowed me to like think, just be grateful that, I don't have anyone in the back of back of my vehicle, talking loud, talking crazy, talking reckless, and I was just like, I can get used to this. I definitely can get used to this. And she ended up waking up, and she knew all the words, which I didn't think she would because she was, you know, wasn't from my generation. She was Gen Z, but she knew the words. She was telling me how her cousins were big fans of AZ. They were big fans of hip hop that came out in the '90s. We talked about some other artists, but for the most part, that was another smooth ride where I felt as though I was riding by myself. You know, I will admit sometimes it can get to the point where it feels too good. I had to check myself a few times, like, hey, you still have people in the vehicle, and you have to act accordingly. Can't be driving too fast. Can't really roll the windows down and blast the song like how I would like. And of course, it was easy because I knew the goal was, as always, get the client to the destination safely without no hiccups. That's where it was. It was good. It was good. When that ride concluded, she gave me a good tip, and then I went on my way. But yeah, that's how it is sometimes when I did rideshare. I don't know who all out there does rideshare or consider doing it, but sometimes you will feel as though you're by yourself while you're riding, and that isn't a terrible thing. Um, but yeah, that's all for today. Thanks for listening. Click the link below and get my book, and I'll holler at you all another time. Later.